the crowd. The weather is superb, so is the track. The scene is set for round 4 of the 1995 World Championship here in Spain at Barcelona. Michael Schumacher in that dominant position, ahead of everybody else, in pole position, 6/10 faster than the two Ferraris, who have been getting better and better all through the season. So you can see there Schumacher, number 1 on the grid, Jorna Lacey on the Ferrari. Then Gerhard Berger's Ferrari alongside Coulthard's William Hill is 5th, and Eddie Irvine is 6th, the top Jordan driver, ahead of his teammate Rubens Barrichello. Herbert 7th, then there's Rubens, followed by Mika Häkkinen and Mansell in the 2 McLaren Mercedes. In 11th position on the grid, Englishman Martin Brundle, German Frentzen, then Salo from Finland, Morbidelli from Italy in the footwork. Olivier Panis is Brundle's teammate. Verstappen is well up in the Simtek, followed by Ukyo Katayama, who's had a terrible practice, and then Carl Wendlinger is down at 20th. He's still not up to pace yet. Luca Badar and Schiattarella, followed by Montermini and Bertrand Gachot, and then last on the grid, and it's no surprise they're 9 seconds off the pace, the 240 Fords of Roberto Moreno from Brazil and his countryman Pedro Diniz. But with 65 laps, I was saying, the important thing today, quite apart from the setup, which we've already heard about, is tyres and the tyre strategy.
Yes, last year amongst the 65 laps, all the front runners made just 2 stops, and again that is an option for them, of course, these pit stops, to change tyres, put on a new set of tyres and to refuel the car. But I think this year we'll see a bit of a difference to that. We have a number of factors involved. The first thing is that last year the pit lane speed limit was just 50 miles an hour, and now that's been increased to 75 miles an hour, so that's going to mean pit stops are a little shorter. But here in general, it does take a relatively long time because the pit lane entry is before the final very fast corner. It's a long pit lane. Therefore, of course, that all takes up time going slowly in the pit lane rather than going quickly on the track. But perhaps the biggest factor here is the fact that the Goodyear tyres are proving to be pretty grippy, but they are having a fairly high wear rate. And that means that whilst many teams can get through the race with just 2 stops, therefore using 3 sets of tyres, I think we're going to see many of the front runners who are going to be charging hard these days because it's so very close up there, going for 3 stops. I suspect that we shall see Schumacher, that has always been his hallmark, and Benetton's hallmark, going for 3 stops, doing just that. And I think Ferrari will do the same, although it could just be that we may see Berger going for a more conservative 2-stop route. I think it's unlikely. And Williams too on 3. In fact, I think we've seen most people doing 3 stops, with the exception of Tyrrell and Ligier, who I'm pretty sure are going to be running 2. So when are they going to be happening? Well, 65-lap race, but the track conditions here are quite interesting because this is a circuit that is not used for really anything apart from the Spanish Grand Prix, and on a circuit normally you need a great deal of rubber down to make the track consistent. Now the rubber, as it's not used very much here, will be increasing throughout the race, and that's going to mean that the work for the tyres is easier later on in the race, so we're going to see the stops loaded a little bit more towards the front, and that means I think first stop round about lap 12 to 14 if you're making 3 stops, and between laps 16 and 18 if you're making 2. And as ever, we shall only really know what's going to happen when this critical point, maybe lap 15, comes up. If the cars haven't stopped by lap 15, I think we can assume that they're going to go for 2 stops rather than 3. But I think there's a lot to be said for stopping 3 times now. Teams are much more confident about the prospects of making good, neat stops, as well as being recognising it's better for overtaking too.
Just seconds before the grid is totally cleared, you can see that there are still mechanics and the trolleys on the tarmac. And the first corner, which they come up to, they will be approaching at race speed, not on this first lap, of course, at some 180 miles an hour. It is a 2.93 mile lap. There are going to be 65 of them. On the right is Schumacher. There he is, pole position on the Benetton, starting from the left-hand side of the grid. On the right-hand side of the front row of the grid is Jorna Lacey. But this, of course, is the formation lap, not the start.
And at that start-finish line, they're doing 170 miles an hour, picking up another 10 miles an hour, as Murray just said, coming down this long straight. This was the straight where we had the classic battle of Mansell and Senna in years gone by. This is the first corner, down from 6th gear, 2nd gear, 65 miles an hour, up through that left-hander. Now the long right they're just starting is going up through the gears. You have to lift off the throttle a little bit midway through there, and coming out of that corner at about 140 miles an hour in 5th. Now down to 2nd gear. This is turn 5 there, round a 2nd gear, 60, 70 mile an hour corner, up to 4th gear, back to 2nd. Schumacher slowing right up on turn 6 there. The next left kink is absolutely flat out, round about 5th gear. They pull up to 150 miles an hour in 5th before then coming down to 2nd gear. And there's that camera of Eddie Irvine we told you about. And there's the corner, corner 7, corner 8, 2nd gear through that. Now this is the point now where the track's been modified, a section's been taken out. You can see the change in the colour of the tarmac. That's the new part. Now this back straight does provide another opportunity for overtaking coming into that slow. Another 2nd gear left-hander. This track having the characteristic of undulating. Look how Schumacher is really slowing up that field. The weather's pretty warm here as Alesi warms up his tyres there, weaving left and right. But what Schumacher doesn't want to do is end up being on that grid stationary with his engine temperatures rising for too long, because all of the field, the 25 other cars behind him, have all got to form up. They've all got to be on the exact right start positions, and they mustn't jump the start, because this time, for the first time, the FIA have got special electronic signalling devices, so they can tell electronically if anybody jumps the start, which would, as ever, incur a time penalty. So finally, coming up now onto the main straight, looking at it from Schumacher's car as they take their grid positions.
And fasten your seatbelts for the start of the Spanish Grand Prix, because, as I said, this first corner is absolutely crucial for Schumacher and for Jean Alesi. And there's one of the Pacifics being wheeled off the grid, but they're right at the back. On the right-hand side of your picture is Michael Schumacher. You can see the heat is increasing because of the heat haze you can see floating through your screen. And it would be wonderful if we could actually see the start from this camera. I don't think we will. Eddie Irvine's roll bar. He's starting from 6th on the grid with Hill, Coulthard, Berger, Alesi and Schumacher in front of him. The last two cars, the yellow ones in the background, are the 40s of Moreno and Denith. And so it looks as though it is ready for go in Spain. It's a long drag. Away they go. Schumacher cuts straight across the front of Alesi. Berger has got Coulthard alongside him. David Coulthard has gone into that first corner in front of Gerhard Berger. He's right behind Alesi and up into 3rd place. So much for the tonsillitis. And so Schumacher leads. Alesi is 2nd. Coulthard is 3rd. Berger is 4th. Eddie Jordan is up into 5th position. I think it was Häkkinen who is 6th, and Damon Hill has dropped back. So that was another good start by Mika Häkkinen, and this time in the McLaren Mercedes he has kept it on the track. He hasn't always done that in the past, but Schumacher now will be trying to break away on lap 1 out of 65, trying to put a gap between himself and Jean Alesi, who will be doing his level best to prevent that happening. But the Renault engine and the Benetton chassis are perfectly matched now. They seem to have the balance extremely well. It's still the Williams 3rd, the Ferrari 4th. The Jordan is in 5th position of Eddie Irvine. And then behind him, the McLaren, I presume, but I don't know, that it's Mika Häkkinen until I see it closer. But it's more likely to be him than Nigel Mansell. And so Schumacher leads. Round the long right-hander, we're coming down towards the right-hander, which drops down at 155 miles an hour. Underneath the sign, round the last right-hander, turn 13 to complete lap 1. And you can see for yourselves that Michael Schumacher has got a clear track behind him and in front of him. Alesi is still 2nd. Hill, it's Damon Hill in 3rd position. Damon Hill is in 3rd place, a wonderful start. Berger is 4th. Irvine is 5th. Mika Häkkinen is 6th. David Coulthard is 7th, and Johnny Herbert is in 8th position. So a super start by Damon Hill from 5th to get ahead of his teammate David Coulthard, and here is a replay.
Let's have a look again now, and we can see Schumacher making a very much a textbook start, but Alesi charging hard up the inside there, taking his second place. And let's look there on the left-hand side, just coming in there, that was Damon Hill, but a good start, great start from Damon Hill, great start also from Mika Häkkinen, who swept ahead of the Jordans there, and Eddie Irvine up to 5th, Häkkinen to 6th, and the ones who lost out were Coulthard back in 7th, Johnny Herbert dropped down 1 place to be 8th, but most of all, Nigel Mansell has dropped back 4 places from his 10th, now back down in 14th position.
And Michael Schumacher at the end of that first lap led by a clear second. And that's a very commanding lead after just 1 lap. Now, can Alesi do anything about it? The Ferrari, as I said earlier on, is beautifully balanced. So now is the Benetton Renault. And the gap of 1 second is going to, let's see how it is. Over the line goes the lead car. We're riding with Michael Schumacher now. And the gap has increased to 1.67 seconds. Alesi second. As you watch Michael Schumacher, Damon Hill is 3 seconds now behind the flying Benetton Renault. It is looking very, very good indeed for the world champion of 1994, Michael Schumacher. That's the fastest lap, 1 minute 25.7, which compares with his pole position time of 1 minute 21.4, when of course he had the minimum fuel load. And he's got the maximum fuel load now that he's going to be carrying in this race. I wouldn't be at all surprised if Schumacher comes in round about lap 12 if he's on a 3-stop strategy. And you can see that as Michael Schumacher is easing away from Jean Alesi, Alesi is doing the same thing for Damon Hill. The gap between the Benetton and the Ferrari is almost exactly the same as that between the Ferrari and the Williams in 3rd place. Gerhard Berger is challenging Damon Hill. He's about 4/10 of a second behind him. Eddie Irvine in a fine 5th position, so he has gained a place. Mika Häkkinen has got ahead of Coulthard. I don't know whether he's not feeling well or the balance of the car that he was worried about in the warm-up is still bothering him. But here is Schumacher completing lap 3. Now, 1.6 was the gap, and it still is. So, Alesi has stabilised the gap. It looks longer than that on the screen, but it isn't. Yes, the gap now increases. Schumacher has pulled away a bit. In fact, he's pulled away a lot. He's put on another second between himself. The German, who is supremely fit, is making a maximum effort. No doubt about that. So, Schumacher, Alesi, Hill, Berger, Irvine, Coulthard, Häkkinen is 7th, Herbert is 8th. Barrichello has dropped from 8th position on the grid to 9th in the race. Heinz-Harald Frentzen is going well in the Sauber. And incidentally, that car is much improved here. As you look at the red Ferrari of Gerhard Berger in 4th position, ahead of him is Damon Hill in the Williams Renault.
Yes, so that really was a great start from Michael Schumacher there, and this is the kind of Schumacher-Benetton combination that we saw so much of last year, and now for the first time this year we seem to have it, pulling out 1 second over Jean Alesi on just his 3rd lap. Really was pretty impressive, and Alesi himself is going to be charging hard. He's going to be determined to hang on there. There's the Ferrari team. They're looking at what's going on, but Alesi is going to be determined to hang on to Schumacher. But what we could also see from that is just how terribly important the grid position is, because the cars tend to get strung out relatively quickly, but also the start. And I suspect that David Coulthard just got a little bit too much wheel spin somewhere, and once you start to lose a place, it's very easy for 1 place lost to become 2, and it's difficult then to regain the ground. The start of a Grand Prix is still the best place of all, albeit the most hazardous, to make up ground and overtake other cars.
Well, we're on lap 5 now, and as he did in qualifying and this morning in the warm-up race, Michael Schumacher is proving that the combination of his talents and the Benetton Renault represents a class of its own, because he's over 4 seconds ahead of this fight that you can see. Alesi, Hill, Berger, 2nd, 3rd, 4th. Then there's a gap to Eddie Irvine. Things are starting to get strung out. Now, we've got about 8 laps, possibly, before there's a tyre stop, if it's a 3-stop strategy, and if they come in as early as lap 12, as we ride with the Williams of David Coulthard, who is in 6th position, and ahead of him is Eddie Irvine's Jordan. We haven't seen any pictures from that roll bar camera yet. I'd love to do so. especially if Coulthard gets up, and he is doing so. He's closing up on the Irishman. Eddie Irvine driving for Jordan, who have yet to score a World Championship point this year.
And here is where Coulthard really needs to close on Eddie Irvine. He's got about a 3-mile-an-hour speed advantage on the straight. This is the fourth gear, 140 miles an hour corner. Lifts off again, fourth gear again, 145. He needs to get right under the rear wing of Eddie Irvine's Jordan. I don't think he's close enough there because he needs to pull up ground. Having said that, he's reeling him in fast. And I think he will definitely have an attempt here. We did not want to cut to that at this point. But at that point, I don't know whether Coulthard managed to get round, but there's a spinning Moreno in the 40. I'm afraid not a particularly significant incident there, but no, we now go back and it's clear that David Coulthard didn't manage to get by Eddie Irvine that time, but this is a difficult time for Eddie Irvine because he will be pleased to be ahead of Coulthard. He'll recognise the fact that really he has no real right to, although he'll defend it vigorously. But for around this part of the lap, all he needs to do is keep it neat. For the next half a lap, David Coulthard will have no real opportunity to get by Eddie Irvine because of the nature of the circuit. There isn't an overtaking opportunity, and David Coulthard needs to position himself throughout the remainder of this lap to get as close as he possibly can onto the back of Eddie Irvine's car, coming through that final last right-hander. There's half a chance here. This is the only other possible overtaking opportunity, but you can see David Coulthard doesn't even try. Now let's see what he does now. This is where he needs to be driving with discipline, with care, not to lose ground here. To lose ground at this point would be critical. You see how hard he was pushing there, a little bit of a squirm from that Williams, and he is well placed at the moment. This does look good. He was considerably further behind Eddie Irvine on the last lap, and he certainly had an attempt. We don't know how good it was, and he's very well placed now. Great driving from David Coulthard. He's much closer. Now, this could well be the overtaking manoeuvre.
Yes, David Coulthard dodges out from behind Eddie Irvine's Jordan, goes for it, and it looks to me as although we couldn't see to the left. Yes, he has succeeded. Now's the time to let us see something from that roll bar camera of Eddie Irvine's, but we don't. And meantime, Michael Schumacher on lap 7 out of 65 is remorselessly pulling away from Jean Alesi's Ferrari. The gap is a whisker under 6 seconds between first and second places, with Damon Hill 6.4 seconds behind Schumacher and just half a second behind Jean Alesi. Gerhard Berger is still fourth. This is the battle for fifth position, and David Coulthard has got that place. He's moving up through the field. The fastest lap we've had so far is that of Schumacher's on lap 3.
Yeah, David Coulthard there really did pull out the perfect manoeuvre, closing at the critical point. He knew where he had to be close, and he did it. And Eddie Irvine, to his credit too, he didn't try and squeeze Coulthard. He knew that it was an early stage of the race and that he should just maintain his line and let the difference in the performance of the cars show. And essentially that is that the fact that the Williams-Renault combination is still a second a lap faster than the Jordan-Peugeot, although the Jordan-Peugeot is going a lot better. But in those 4 or 5 short laps, being behind Eddie Irvine, lost David Coulthard 4.5 seconds. He's 4.5 seconds off now Gerhard Berger, and I think he'll now close that gap. But here's the next one.
Damon Hill is, but there he is, and going for it. You can see the Williams. There are the 2 Ferraris with the Williams sandwich between them. Jean Alesi in second place. Damon Hill in third position, Gerhard Berger is in fourth place, and David Coulthard, now fifth, is doing his best to close on the Ferrari of Gerhard Berger, the man who last won a Grand Prix for Ferrari, both officially and unofficially. He won in Germany officially last year. He won unofficially in Brazil this year, only to lose the place when David Coulthard and Michael Schumacher had their points restored to them after the fuel controversy. So the Ferraris are on the pace, very much so, as far as second place is concerned. But you saw Michael Schumacher move through your picture. He's on lap 8. He's leading by 7 seconds. You can see the position. Second, Alesi. Third, Hill. Fourth, Berger. And the gap between Gerhard Berger, who is fourth, and David Coulthard, who is in fifth position, is just over 5 seconds. Eddie Irvine dropping back. I don't know whether he has a problem, but Mika Häkkinen is only 7/10 of a second behind the Jordan in 7th place. And there's a battle too between Häkkinen 7th and Johnny Herbert. So there's action all through the field, but Michael Schumacher is making this race his own.
Yes, and now we have Damon Hill, who is within half a second of Jean Alesi there. We saw him have half an attempt the lap before to go by. Now, what Hill needs to do on this lap, I'm sure he can be quicker. He needs to do exactly to Jean Alesi what David Coulthard did to Eddie Irvine, and that's use the back part of the lap to close up on Jean Alesi to get to a situation where he's right underneath Alesi's wing coming onto that main straight. And although there looks to be a gap there, he's 0.3 of a second. That's the gap. That's closer than it was before, but we would expect that to happen. Here we are halfway round. Hill again just needs to maintain this kind of gap. He shouldn't get any closer than this at this point, because the closer he gets, he'll start to lose front-end grip. And now we can see that was a McLaren there with
Katayama. It was Ukyo Katayama who's had a lot of problems here, including engine problems. But whilst Schumacher is the fastest man on the track, the second fastest man on the track is David Coulthard. There's only 0.2 of a second between their lap times. Coulthard is quicker than Alesi, quicker than Hill, quicker than Berger, and he's closing on Gerhard Berger, who is in fourth position. As we look back from Alesi's Ferrari, or did, he's over the line now, and Schumacher is, I'm just waiting for Alesi to go up to that first corner, and Schumacher is now nearly 8 seconds ahead of Alesi on lap 10. It's getting pretty close to first pit stop time if we're on a 3-stop strategy. Riding with Jean Alesi now, you can't even see Schumacher's car ahead, but you certainly can see Damon Hill's car. It's right behind the Ferrari.
Yes, I'm quite sure that Jean Alesi's car is actually holding up Damon Hill a bit at this stage. This is why David Coulthard is running half a second faster. He's got clear track in front of him. They're the tyres for Michael Schumacher. They're clearly not out in the pit lane yet, so it doesn't help us get any kind of clue when he's due to stop. But Damon Hill's job is harder than that for David Coulthard in terms of getting by Alesi. When Coulthard got by Irvine, he had a significant performance advantage on the straight, and that is not a benefit that Hill has. The Ferrari and the Williams are very, very evenly matched, and the problem is that the closer Hill gets to Alesi, the more he will lose the front-end grip from the car. That all-important balance front to rear will be compromised because the front wings won't work as well. That'll mean his tyres will slide, he'll get understeer at the front, and that will degrade his tyre. So he's got to be careful when he closes, when he does move very close to Alesi. Now this looks like he's much better. He's one more corner to go. He's closer, but probably still too far away. This is going to be frustrating, I think, for Damon Hill.
So as you watch this battle, Nigel Mansell, who started 10th, has dropped down to 13th position. Martin Brundle, who started in 11th place, is still there. Michael Schumacher on lap 11 is 6.8 seconds, so the gap has been stabilised ahead of Jean Alesi. We're riding with Gerhard Berger at the present moment, and look ahead and you can see Damon Hill's car tucked up behind the Ferrari of Gerhard Berger's teammate, Jean Alesi, who's in second place. There they are, Alesi, number 27, that famous number for Ferrari, and also for Williams and some other teams. It's carried some great drivers. Jean Alesi is one of them, still to win a Grand Prix, although he's had 2 second places this year, and he's had about 6 altogether in his career, as now the lapping is starting, because that was Moreno being lapped by Michael Schumacher. The next will be Pedro Diniz, who is in 24th position, and we're only on lap 11, and already the leader, Michael Schumacher, the fastest man on the course, lap 3, 125.149, is scorching his way through the field, past the 240s and up to Bertrand Gachot's Pacific.
Now, looking at the lap times, I am going to take a guess here. I don't think they're going to make the 3 stops we thought of. The times just seem to be a little bit slow, and the track conditions would seem to be good to me. It's my guess that they're going to go for 2 stops, and that means that they will not stop for the next 4 laps. Lap 11, if they're going to do 3 stops, the stops from Schumacher and Alesi will need to come in the next 2 or 3 laps to make sense. If they haven't stopped by lap 15, then I think it's going to be 2.
Well, you've seen Alesi go past the 40s. One of them, and he's now up to Pedro Diniz. So if the Brazilian gets in the way, this is going to be Damon Hill's opportunity. The Ferrari with the yellow flashes on the front and rear wings is Jean Alesi's. He is past now the 40, that moves across and gets in the way temporarily, but very shortly, of Damon Hill. Looking back at the Williams and the leaders now, the gap is actually coming down a bit. Schumacher has slowed down on his previous lap, probably because of the traffic. There he is, 6.2 seconds, and it was over 7 seconds. Not too significant, because somebody has to start lapping the field, and of course it's the leader. So he's the first man that slowed up, but then when he gets past them, the people behind him in second, third and the other places have got to get past those men too. So I don't think Schumacher's lost his advantage. We'll soon know. He's now on his 13th lap out of 65. The gap was 6.3 seconds. There are the Williams mechanics waiting to put new tyres and wheels on somebody.
And that makes it look very like I was completely wrong with the last comment, because to stop at this point is certainly consistent with making 3 stops. We don't know who that's going to be, but if it looks like Williams are doing it, then either Damon Hill is not looking in as good a shape as we thought, and Schumacher looking in better shape, or in fact they're all going to be running on 3 stops. But certainly it looks like Hill's going to be the first one in. But looking at those 40 cars, they shouldn't be quite the liability that they were in the last Grand Prix at Imola, when they really were a couple of mobile chicanes, because at the last Grand Prix they made a one-stop strategy which left them really limping around very slowly for the whole race. Here they are going for the rather more radical for them 2 stops, which should bring them up by at least 1.5 seconds a lap. So we'll have to see and hope that that does make a difference, and that they do leave the front runners to get on with the race.
Well, what you can say so far is that, as I said earlier on, Schumacher and Benetton are in a class of their own, because Alesi, Hill, Berger are close together. Johnny Herbert in the other Benetton, and Johnny is no slouch, is down in 8th position behind Mika Hakkinen, who's going well in the McLaren Mercedes. He started in 9th position, so he's 2 places ahead of his grid start. As we look at Michael Schumacher, now he's on lap 14, going into the first right-hander at about 85 miles an hour, slowing down. And Damon Hill is coming into the pits. Damon Hill at the end of lap 13 comes into the pits. Let's see how long this stop takes. That fuel nozzle weighs 24 pounds, and there's the inflexible fuel hose behind it. 10.3 seconds. That will, I'm just checking to see how many places he will have lost. I should think David Coulthard has got past him. Eddie Irvine won't have. So, if I'm right, Coulthard is up into 4th place. Damon Hill is down into 5th place. And Michael Schumacher, of course, has increased the gap between himself and Hill. And it's going to be critical how long it takes the Benetton mechanics to change his tyres and wheels. They're extremely good at it. The fact that Hill has stopped for 10 seconds indicates that he took on about 120 litres of fuel.
Well, possibly not quite that much, but certainly sufficient fuel to make me think, and there's McLaren getting ready for their first stop, almost certainly for Hakkinen, I would say. Meanwhile, I can tell you that David Coulthard must be in line for a stop, because the tyre warmers are off the second set of Williams tyres. But what I think is happening, certainly for Hill looking at that, is that they are making a very early first of 2 stops. To stop in the pits for 10.3 seconds is really too long just to put in enough fuel for another 15 or 18 laps. But again, we'll have to wait and see what happens in another 20 or so laps. That's the time when we can have a much clearer idea.
Yes, it will all come clearer then. And we're riding into the pits now with David Coulthard coming in from 4th position on the grid. Car up on its jacks, front and rear. There's the fuel filler. Nice clean removal. Excellent, excellent. David Coulthard, 7.6 seconds. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that the Williams mechanics have been that much better than the Benetton mechanics, who took 10.3 seconds. It could mean, of course, and probably does, that David Coulthard has taken on less fuel than Michael Schumacher did. But meantime, the leader is on lap 15 out of 65.
Well, that's certainly very interesting indeed. They're certainly making us earn our money and trying to work out what's going on, because that sort of stop on lap 14, taking on 7.5 seconds worth of fuel, that was entirely consistent with making 3 stops. So the next thing we have to wonder is, was the stop of Damon Hill really to put on that much more fuel, so he will stop later than Coulthard next time? Or was it the fact that there was some kind of slip that wasn't obvious to us that meant that Hill's stop was just longer than it should have been?
Yes, and Michael Schumacher, of course, is still on his way. Damon Hill was the man who came in for that first major pit stop amongst the leaders. 10.3 seconds, 50 laps left. So the leader, Michael Schumacher, that we look at now, is on lap 16, leading now Jean Alesi by 8 seconds. Gerhard Berger by 13 seconds. And at the end of the next lap, I'm not expecting, in fact, David Coulthard won't be fourth. It's Mika Häkkinen. He's just gone through. The Finnish driver is up into the points. I've just seen Eddie Irvine. You've just seen Eddie Irvine's car. Michael Schumacher there, and one of the McLarens is certainly coming in because their people are all ready. That is Eddie Irvine. So Irvine has stopped, Hill has stopped, Coulthard has stopped, Schumacher has still to come in, so has Alesi, so is Gerhard Berger. Now, as we are up to 16, is it conceivable that there's only going to be 2 stops for the Benettons and the Ferraris?
Well, I think it is, Murray. I think that's really very likely now. That's Nigel Mansell coming in for his stop. We thought it was going to be Häkkinen, but Mansell coming in is interesting. He was back in 13th place. Frustrated anyway, a good short stop. Now that again, that's consistent with making 3 stops. But this to me looks very good news indeed for Michael Schumacher, because for Schumacher still to be all right, still to be out rather, he's gone past the 25% distance, and he should really have come into the pits by now if he was going to be making 3 stops. Therefore the conclusion is he's making 2, and therefore that makes his front running pace in the race so far all the more impressive, and it looks to me like Michael Schumacher is about to dominate the Spanish Grand Prix, reliability and incidents allowing.
And into the pits with Gerhard Berger's Ferrari, 3rd position, 21 seconds behind Michael Schumacher. Scream of that V12 engine, 8.5 seconds Gerhard Berger. The quickest stop we've had so far is that of Nigel Mansell, 7.4 seconds on lap 17 out of 65. Michael Schumacher has just made another fastest lap, 1:25.058 on lap 16. As the fuel load comes down and as he found a gap in the traffic, Schumacher has gone even faster, and as Jonathan has said, if he is on a 2-stop strategy, this is a big advantage for him. There he is, second in the World Championship, 6 points behind Damon Hill. Damon Hill down to 7th position. In fact, race order on lap 17 at the moment. Schumacher is leading. That is Pedro Diniz in the 40 Ford. Alesi is second. Berger is probably still just about 3rd, but it's going to be a close thing with him and Häkkinen. And Johnny Herbert is up into 5th position. Rubens Barrichello is in 6th position. And news from Tony Jardine, who's in the Benetton pit.
Well, it's just behind that Ferrari pit stop before, and it was a brilliant stop from the Ferrari mechanics, but only just now have the Benetton mechanics moved out from the back of the garage and into position at the front. Up till now, they've just been sitting on the big chests at the back of the garage, quite calm and collected, but they're about to go into action, it seems.
Awful pit stop for poor Mika Häkkinen. Now, the McLaren team have been practicing their refueling techniques at the Spanish motor industry track at Idiada between San Marino and here. But whatever the problem was, they don't seem to have overcome it, because it looked to me as though that fuel nozzle was stuck in the side of Häkkinen's car. It took 11.5 seconds stationary, plus, of course, the run-in and the drive out of the long pit lane here. Meantime, Michael Schumacher and Alesi still fight for the lead, but that fight now has got a gap of 7.5 seconds between them. And coming towards us, the McLaren. Behind the McLaren, that is Nigel Mansell, and he is down in 18th position on lap 19. So we're getting towards 1/3 distance. The Benetton mechanics are out in the pit lane with the wheels and tyres for one of their cars. Johnny Herbert in the second Benetton is in 4th position, but 30 seconds behind race leader Michael Schumacher. There he is.
So far we've got, and there is Johnny Herbert coming into the pits. We can see it. Johnny Herbert making the first of what will be certainly 2 stops for Herbert. And that means again that Schumacher really is looking so very impressive, because he will again doubtless only make 2 stops. Jean Alesi is the other one who we've not yet seen, and he will be making 2 stops too. So at the moment the question marks lie over whether or not Damon Hill is actually going to be making two or three. His stop was relatively long. It could be he's making 2 stops with that early first stop. David Coulthard, though, that to me looks like he is making 3 stops. The first stop that he made was really too short to put enough fuel in to do the next sector unless it comes in early. But I'm afraid I can give you no excuses, but all we can do is watch to see what happens over the next 20 laps, to see when the second stop happens, and then we can really be sure what's happening in the final half of the race.
Yes, the Benetton team have an uncanny knack of producing a different strategy from a lot of the others and getting it absolutely right. So many times last year they stopped 3 times when the opposition stopped twice and proved to be the right thing. And Jean Alesi now comes in for his first stop. In second position, long way behind Michael Schumacher in terms of time. Now we're riding out. Remember, 75-mile-an-hour limit. They have a limiter on the cars, and there are the most sophisticated electrical instruments now to make sure that they don't speed in the pit lane in the same way as there now are for the first time, to make sure they don't jump the start. Now, Nigel Mansell has had a spin somewhere, I can tell you that. I don't know where it was. And that's put him right down to 22nd position. He's out of the race. Nigel Mansell out of the race in the garage. So out goes Nigel Mansell. I suspect he won't be all that sorry, because he was most unhappy with the handling of the car, as you probably heard at the beginning of the programme. Michael Schumacher still on his way, yet to stop. But behind him, Alesi second has stopped. Hill second has stopped. Coulthard fourth. Hill third has stopped. Coulthard fourth has stopped. Berger fifth has stopped. And surely it must be time for Schumacher to come in for his first stop very soon.
Yes, indeed. I'm sure that he'll be coming in at the end of this lap, if not the next, because now with 20 laps gone, he's driven superbly, and the car, the package, looks very, very competitive indeed. There's nothing to come near it at the moment, and neither the Ferrari nor the Williams have been able to maintain this sort of pace, and they've had less fuel on. We know that because they've come in earlier. And there's Nigel Mansell's off. That must surely be the incident that caused Nigel Mansell to come into retirement. That's the gravel trap. Mansell wrestles with the car. This is a slow motion replay there as he grapples with the car. He's probably just braked a bit too late. That looks to me like a driving error. I don't know whether we have another view of that. I think probably not. I think that's probably the place where it happened as well. And Nigel has had an unhappy weekend in terms of his appreciation of the car's performance. He qualified well. He qualified within a tenth of a second of Mika Häkkinen, but he has been frustrated. He's found that the car's characteristics, the characteristics of his McLaren, really haven't suited him at all. And in that Mansell likes a car that turns in sharply to the corner, and in other words, does not understeer. And the McLaren at the moment understeers, and that doesn't suit Mansell at all. But also, that's Mika Salo, the Finn, coming in for his first pit stop. But apart from not suiting Mansell, Mansell is always also quite adamant that it also is not good for the team, and that Häkkinen would go a lot better too if they sorted the car.
So in now comes Michael Schumacher in the lead. He was 33 seconds ahead of Jean Alesi. He can afford to have a very careful and relaxed and deliberate pit stop. Out he goes, 8.1 seconds, and he will rejoin before Jean Alesi exits and comes past the start and finish point. He was certainly shot out of the pit lane there. Up to the first corner, Schumacher still leading. Alesi is in second position. We're on lap 22. And that is Karl Wendlinger in the Sauber. As we watch Michael Schumacher, well, he's broken the back of this race. There's no doubt about that at all. If he's on a two-stop strategy, he's now got a commanding advantage because he is still in the lead after his first pit stop. That's a dream that any driver would have, and he's still got a good lead. So all the top 6 men now have stopped and are on their second set of tyres.
Indeed, and that was a great demonstration of tremendous teamwork all round. Schumacher is doing a superlative job out on the track, but the Benetton team, as they have done so many times before, and some traffic there, that's Schumacher going by Karl Wendlinger. In fact, they were teammates in the Mercedes sports car team some years ago, but the Benetton mechanics did a great job there in making that stop just 7.2 8.1 seconds at rest there, and that was highly impressive, bearing in mind that they were surely putting enough fuel on for 1/3 of the race distance. And the overall stop time of Schumacher in the pit lane of 28.3 seconds, that was the time from coming into the pit lane to leaving the pit lane, is better than anybody bar David Coulthard. And that just shows you how good Schumacher is at not losing time in the pit stop, in the driving of the pit stop, and that part is how fast he can get into the pit lane and how fast he can get out of it. Coming out is not so difficult, but coming in when you're on dusty track that you're not familiar with, trying to drive quickly but not making mistakes, is really very, very tricky indeed.
Well, the status quo has been returned, because the order now with Schumacher leading and Alesi in second place, followed by Damon Hill third, Coulthard fourth, Berger is fifth, Johnny Herbert is sixth, and there is a 7.5 second gap between Michael Schumacher that you're looking at and John Alesi in the Ferrari, who is again in second place where he finished and in the San Marino Grand Prix and in the Argentine Grand Prix. And that was the gap that was existing before they came in the earlier stages of the race. But as Jonathan has said, Michael Schumacher really has got this race by the throat. He's now got that gap between himself and Alesi, and it looks as though he's going to hold it, because the Benetton and the Renault are reliable enough. The reason that he went out, of course, in the San Marino Grand Prix was nothing to do with reliability. It was to do with whether he made a mistake or whether there was a problem with the car. And the general conventional wisdom is that Schumacher made a mistake which took him off.
We can see from that too that David Coulthard and Gerhard Berger have both made their first pit stops, but Coulthard's was the quicker. He was some 3.5 seconds less in the pit lane than Gerhard Berger was, and that's contributed to the fact that Coulthard is now, he's reversed the situation with Berger. He was behind, but he's now 5 seconds ahead of Berger. But sadly, there is a loser. There's certainly at least one loser from the first round of pit stops, and one of those is Martin Brundle, who took some 58 seconds in the pit lane compared to the 30 norm. That's nearly half a minute. He must have had some kind of major problem in there with the refueling. He may have had some other car problem, but that sadly has put Brundle down from a strong 11th place back down to 17th, and at the moment he's not lapping particularly quickly. Now, whether that's due to traffic or some problem with the car, we don't know.
Lap 24, just over 1/3 distance. Michael Schumacher leads Jean Alesi's Ferrari that we're riding with now by 8 seconds. Alesi is 2.5 seconds ahead of Damon Hill third. Damon Hill is 4 seconds ahead of Coulthard, who is fourth. Berger is in 5th position. Johnny Herbert is 6th, so both the Benettons in the top 6. Both the Ferraris in the top 6. And for that matter, both the Williams in the top 6. As Alesi comes up behind one of the Ligiers, it's Martin Brundle's Ligier, and he's in 17th position. Everybody up to 14th position, that is 13th position. Now Gianni Morbidelli in the Arrow's Heart has been lapped. Brundle has now been lapped, and in 7th position is Mika Hakkinen in the McLaren. 8th is Eddie Irvine in the Jordan. 9th is Barrichello, and John Alesi up behind the Ligier of Martin Brundle. Schumacher's already lapped Martin Brundle, who is 14th. Now it's Sean Alesi's turn. 10 seconds, 10.4 seconds is the gap. Michael Schumacher has got a devastating winning rhythm now. He's also got the fastest lap of the race on lap 16. That time of 1 minute 25.058 is still the quickest.
Yes, and the real battle now is between Jean Alesi and Damon Hill. Hill has now closed that gap. We can see it there. He's now just 1.5 seconds slower than Alesi. The traffic there ahead of Alesi looks like one of the Pacifics. No, it's one of the Ligiers there, is going to provide a potential opportunity for Hill to close the gap. It's actually coming in quite a good time there, and this could well provide a chance for Hill to close up. But the big question mark at the moment is, are Hill and Coulthard going to make 3 stops or 2? We will know the answer in the next 10 laps, because in the next 10 laps, if they are going to make 3 stops, they will need to stop to make their second. The only other person who I think could be making 3 would be Eddie Irvine. He stopped relatively early. So it could be those three only who we should see potentially stopping in the next 10 laps. And there's a Ferrari gone.
That's Alesi's engine blown out of the race, and that makes a gift to Michael Schumacher that he will be delighted to receive. And it means now, as the unfortunate John Alesi, having exploded his Ferrari V12, retires from the Spanish Grand Prix up to second place. 12 seconds behind Schumacher goes Damon Hill. Up to third place, 17 seconds behind Schumacher goes David Coulthard. So the Williams are now second and third. Gerhard Berger is still fourth, 25 seconds behind. Johnny Herbert moves up into fifth position. Mika Häkkinen is in sixth place. Now, Nigel Mansell, of course, has already retired. He's spun out, went across the gravel trap and talked to Tony Jardine.
Nigel, bad luck. Can you tell us what happened?
I don't think it's bad luck, Tony. This is the question. I let Michael through. I was having handling problems anyway. And then I tried to turn in the corner behind Michael and the car just went straight on. And I was suffering a little bit the lap before. I get to the next corner, I put the car on full lock to turn left. The car just went straight on. Oh, we don't know. We're checking the tyre pressures now and the front wing and the underneath. But I mean, we can't drive like that.
Any problems before that, Nigel?
I mean, the car was inconsistent and understeer to oversteer. But at least you could get round the corner. But when you turn into a corner and the car doesn't want to turn, that's a problem.
Thanks, Nigel.
Well, I think Nigel Mansell was being as diplomatic as he could be. One does wonder whether he's going to get fed up with the whole thing and opt out of it. He's a very, very unhappy man, and seemingly with justification, because Mika Häkkinen has had problems too. It is a surprise to a lot of people that an organisation with the experience and the facilities of McLaren are taking as long as they are taking to get the car right. We all know that it's very difficult to get a car which isn't absolutely right out of the box to perform properly. But Nigel Mansell, as an ex-world champion, won't, I imagine, be happy to hang on indefinitely until it is got right. I sincerely hope I'm wrong. But on lap 27 out of 65, over the line goes the Benetton. Schumacher leading Damon Hill now by 12 seconds and Coulthard by 18 seconds. Gerhard Berger fourth by 25. Johnny Herbert by 36. Häkkinen in the second McLaren, which is going well, by 38 seconds. And then Eddie Irvine, Barrichello, Frentzen, Pani, Salo, Morbidelli is in 12th position. And Schumacher has lapped everybody on lap 28 already, up to 11th place. The 11th place man being Mika Salo in the Tyrrell. What he's just been lapped, that was Schumacher going through on the inside.
And reflecting back to Alesi's engine blow-up there, that's going to be absolutely mortifying for him. Alesi's looked so strong this weekend. He was fastest in the first qualifying session on Friday. He was second fastest, of course, in yesterday's qualifying for second on the grid and running second. This year has looked so strong for Alesi. But what was interesting looking back at the footage of that was the fact that Alesi obviously could anticipate the fact that his engine was losing power, because he jinked right on the straight. He pulled out of the way of Damon Hill. And then about a second or two later, we saw the cloud of smoke out of the back, signalling the end of the Ferrari engine. But in case anybody thinks that this could have been a consequence of Damon Hill pushing Alesi hard and making him overdrive the Ferrari and ended up breaking the engine, I really think that is highly unlikely. These engines are very, very tough indeed these days anyway, although of course they are highly stressed. But there's little that the driver can really do to influence it. The temperatures are obviously all brought up to full working temperature. The cars do have rev limiters that stop them being over-revved anyway. They are used to running right at the top end of their rev scale, and that's nearly 17,000 revs for the Ferrari. And the gearbox too, one used to be able to miss-shift with the gearbox and go, for example, from fourth gear to second rather than fourth to fifth. Now, that kind of thing in the old days would blow up an engine. But now, with the semi-automatic gearboxes, and just look at the pace there of Schumacher, new fastest lap, 24.7, highly, highly impressive. From Damon Hill now, Damon Hill there, new fastest lap. But really, very hard on John Alesi there, and not his fault, I'm sure of that.
Well now, is this race exciting? It's certainly getting to be, because Damon Hill seems to be flying. He is flying. 1 minute 24.7, the new fastest lap. I'll tell you that the gap at that time was 9.8 seconds, and it's going to be more than interesting to see whether he can claw into Michael Schumacher's lead of just under 10 seconds. Incidentally, if the positions were the same as far as the first two are concerned, those historic rivals now, Michael Schumacher and Damon Hill, who fought for the World Championship all through last year and finished first and second, if the positions are the same at the end of this race, Damon Hill would still be leading the World Championship, as you watch David Coulthard third in the second of the two Williams Renaults. Schumacher leads, Hill second, Coulthard third. Berger is still soldiering on, but he is lapping 1.5 seconds slower than the Williams in front of him.
And Schumacher has now responded to the increased pressure there from Damon Hill. The pressure might not appear to be there. After all, 10 seconds is quite a lead, but Schumacher will want to know that he is capable of responding and capable of maintaining at least his gap and not allowing it to close there. And Schumacher's just put in a lap of 24.9 as opposed to Damon Hill's 24.4. Hill himself was 2 seconds slower, but traffic is a big factor here. So Schumacher has lapped just 0.2 of a second, in fact, slower than Damon Hill's best lap. It really is looking to be very, very good indeed. But again, at this point, I'm pretty sure that Damon Hill is running less fuel, therefore a lighter car, therefore potentially a faster car than Michael Schumacher.
A fascinating tactical situation. Michael Schumacher, in effect, at this stage of the race, saying to Damon Hill, anything that you can do, Damon, I can do as well. Not quite as well, because his lap was 0.2 of a second, but that is very little indeed. And the gap was now 11 seconds. And we're on lap 30, coming up to half distance. Everybody now has stopped and taken on tyres. Deniz is out of the race, Mansell is out of the race, Luca Badoer in the Minardi is out of the race, Jean Alesi is, and Roberto Moreno in the 40 in 21st position is already 2 laps behind the leaders as Damon Hill comes in. Now this is his second stop. His first stop took 10.3 seconds. Out he blasts. You've got to be very careful, of course, not to exceed the pit lane speed limit. It's a draconian penalty if you do, because you have a 10-second penalty. But it's more than that, because you've got to come into the pit lane, slow down, stop, and then get out again.
Well, we thought that if he stopped in the 10 laps, between lap 24 and 34, that would indicate a 3-stop strategy for Hill, and there is the proof of it. That really does make it pretty clear now that Damon Hill is going to make 3 stops, and that was the second of 3, so he's got 1 more to go. But so only has Michael Schumacher, and I'm afraid this is going to make Damon Hill's chances of challenging Schumacher virtually impossible, because Schumacher has clearly got the edge on performance overall. He was ahead, and Damon Hill was, as we suspected, running a lighter fuel load. So I think Hill can now only hope for some kind of problem, reliability-wise or incident, for Michael Schumacher to have a chance of winning this race.
And that's a pretty unlikely contingency, because, as I've said before, the Benetton organisation at Enstone has got superb facilities, an enormous amount of money behind it. Top people like Ross Brawn and Rory Byrne, respectively, the technical director and the aerodynamicist. And with the Renault engine, which they share with the Williams team, now it's quite obvious that Benetton have got a winning combination.
And David Coulthard is also in now. There we are, we're watching David Coulthard's Williams being refueled. Another quick stop, so that also means that David Coulthard and Hill are both running 3 stops, and that's the second of their 3 stops.
And Michael Schumacher leads now by an increased margin. As you look at the Ferrari of Gerhard Berger, the only one that is left, and right on his tail is Damon Hill. This is the battle for 3rd position behind Schumacher and Coulthard, although David Coulthard, of course, has been into the pits. We'll have to wait and see on that one, but certainly this is a podium battle between Gerhard Berger and Damon Hill. And you can there now, we're riding on the rear wing of Gerhard Berger's Ferrari.
Now, apart from the pit stops that we've seen for Coulthard and Damon Hill, we also have had a pit stop. We didn't see it for Eddie Irvine, and that means that he is the third of the cars that are running 3 stops. Now, Gerhard Berger there, I don't think is, and therefore I don't expect us to see any more pit stops for another 7 or so laps. I think it'll be round about lap 40. We're on lap 32 when we'll see the 2 stoppers making their second pit stop.
And Gerhard Berger is certainly not going to make it easy for Damon Hill to get past him. It could be a very wide Ferrari that is being followed by the Williams Renault. Through to complete the gap. Now, the gap between Berger and Hill, you can see for yourselves. I'll tell you in terms of time, it's about 0.4 of a second, and decreasing as Damon tries to go through on the inside, and Mika Häkkinen from 5th position in the race stops. We're on his car now, looking back as they push the rear wing to help him out on acceleration. That little shove makes a bit of a difference. And Häkkinen exits the pit lane. There is the battle for 2nd position. Ferrari 2nd, Williams 3rd. Into the left-hander. Johnny Herbert is in 4th position. David Coulthard will be up into 5th position now, ahead of Häkkinen in the McLaren. 7th position is Barrichello, who is 1 place ahead of his teammate Eddie Irvine.
Now here we've got an interesting situation in that we've got Damon Hill with a fresh set of tyres, but with a moderate fuel load, probably some 60 litres in that car, enough to do 25% of the race distance, and ahead of him, second, is Gerhard Berger. Now Berger is going to have less fuel. He's got some, we believe, 7 laps to go. That's something, and he's got his hand up in the air. Looks like a problem there for... He's either waving at something or waving at the crowd. I can't believe he's doing that.
I believe that he's waving at the car. Oh, they're into the pit lane. He's indicating to Damon Hill. I remember very well that Gerhard Berger, when Riccardo Patrese hit his car, was criticised for not indicating, the Portuguese Grand Prix was criticised for not indicating that he was turning in, and he has been very, very particular about signalling his intention to enter the pits ever since. That's a good stop. Not all that much fuel, under 7 seconds for Gerhard Berger, but it means that Johnny Herbert will now be in 3rd position, and it means that the Benetton Renaults are both in the top 3. It also means that Johnny Herbert seems to be getting to grips with the Benetton. He had a major problem with handling because he was trying to use the same setup as Michael Schumacher, which is a very distinctive one. Schumacher adopts a very pointy, darty setup for his car. Johnny Herbert likes to be much more forceful with the car, less... that's a replay of Gerhard Berger putting his arm out, indicating to Damon Hill that he's got a problem or he's going in, and he went in. But Johnny Herbert, I say, has been working remorselessly and getting his own setup for the Benetton Renault, and it seems to be working. He's in 3rd place, and behind Schumacher, the race leader, and Damon Hill.
Well, that really was very courteous of Gerhard Berger to give the following Damon Hill. He clearly would have known he was very close behind, all the warning he possibly could about coming into the pits, because, as we've heard, there are significant dangers about making last-minute manoeuvres. But another time to revise my opinion of what's going on here, and it now looks as if Berger is going to make the 2nd of 3 stops. And of course we saw Häkkinen then come in for what was going to be the 2nd, undoubtedly, or what was the 2nd of 3 stops he's going to make. But I must admit I'm a little bit mystified as to why McLaren did not bring Häkkinen in earlier for his first stop, because he didn't stop until lap 17. He took on a fair amount of fuel, apparently. He was in the pits for 11.5 seconds, stationary for 11.5 seconds. So all that looked a little bit confusing. So that's the excuse on that one. But now it does seem that, in fact, of the front runners, it is just the Benetton team who've gone for 2 stops. We've got Schumacher, who has not come in again. That's clear. He's made his first stop at lap 21. We're now lap 34. And I would expect both Schumacher and Herbert to be out for another half a dozen laps before coming in round about lap 40. So Schumacher's position really does look very, very strong indeed.
Yes, 37 seconds ahead of Damon Hill now, as Gerhard Berger, having rejoined the track after taking on his having made his 2nd stop, and he's therefore on his 3rd set of tyres in this race. Behind him is Mika Häkkinen, so it's a pretty close battle there now for 5th position. There's Berger holding it. One of the Minardi is that of Pierluigi Martini between them. And and the Italian is well down the order. There's Berger, fifth position. Look back and you'll see Häkkinen. There he is. Now, Mika Häkkinen has taken the McLaren Mercedes by the throat, as I said earlier on, and he's frankly dealt with his handling problems better than Nigel Mansell did. He's had a lot more experience of them, of course, because he drove in the first two races and has done a lot of testing. But now you can see this is the battle of the race between the Ferrari of Gerhard Berger, the McLaren Mercedes of Mika Häkkinen. Schumacher still leads on lap 36, so we are over half distance. He stopped once. Damon Hill, 36 seconds behind, has stopped twice. Johnny Herbert has stopped once, and David Coulthard, who is fourth, has stopped twice. Berger, and then Häkkinen. Seventh is Irvine, eighth is Barrichello. So the two Jordans at the moment are both on target to finish, and so far in three races they've only had one finish, and that was Eddie Irvine in the San Marino Grand Prix.
I must say, I'm very impressed with Johnny Herbert's drive at the moment. He's just put in his fastest race lap, which is just 1 second slower than that of Michael Schumacher. Running in third place, he's just 2 seconds behind Damon Hill, and really getting much more confident with that Benetton car now. Again in qualifying, he was 2 seconds off the pace of Schumacher, who is blindingly quick. I think that everybody now recognises that Schumacher is something quite exceptional of Senna levels of speed. But come to the race, Herbert's much more competitive, and let's just hope that he has a good solid run here, because he really needs it to continue boosting his confidence. Meanwhile, Martin Brundle has worked his way up from that 18th after that poor first stop, and he is now up to 12th place, and he is closing the gap on Mika Salo ahead. Mika Salo in the Tyrrell in 11th, and Panis just ahead of Salo in 10th place. And Brundle again closing on Panis. He out-qualified Panis, his Ligier teammate, and that was tremendously important to him, and he'll be very eager to do whatever he can to make up for that bad stop and get ahead of Panis by the end of the race, and it is possible.
And our Spanish producer is very sensibly concentrating on the battle for fifth position between Gerhard Berger and Häkkinen, as Gerhard Berger moves inside the Tyrrell Yamaha to lap it, because this is the real excitement of the race. Michael Schumacher is 36 seconds ahead of Damon Hill, but Johnny Herbert now, who is actually lapping marginally slower at the moment than Hill, is only 2.6 seconds in third place behind the Williams Renault of the World Championship leader Damon Hill. And there is Katayama's car. That's Katayama, and we're looking at it from Gerhard Berger's Ferrari. So there is Berger, who's past Häkkinen. Past Katayama. There is Häkkinen behind in sixth position. Berger comes through and completes the lap. And the gap between Gerhard Berger and Michael Schumacher, the race leader, on lap 38, as Häkkinen in the background passes Ukyo Katayama's Tyrrell Yamaha. Here's a replay. Gerhard Berger goes through and takes the Tyrrell on the inside. Now it's Mika Häkkinen's turn. There he is in the background. We're with Gerhard Berger now. This is a replay of him taking Katayama, the second replay. And it hasn't been a happy Spain at all for the Tyrrell team. They've had engine problems. They couldn't get any grip in the warm-up this morning. The Benetton mechanic sitting in the garage studying. They can see the monitors just as you can, and they know that their man, Michael Schumacher, that man on lap 39, is dominating the Spanish Grand Prix as he has dominated other races in 1994, and as the late great Ayrton Senna used to dominate races. A 38-second gap now is enormous.
And it was around about this time in last year's Spanish Grand Prix when Schumacher slowed by some 2 or 3 seconds and left us mystified as to the cause. And it turned out that Schumacher was jammed in fifth gear and drove with extraordinary adaptability, getting his Benetton around to lap just 2 or 3 seconds slower than Damon Hill, who went on to win the race, Schumacher being in second. Now, there's no sign of any of that here, and I'm quite sure that that won't happen, but another tremendous demonstration of the ability of this man. And now, reflecting back to his interview prior to this race, he claims that he wasn't making mistakes under pressure back at Imola. Well, if he wasn't making it under pressure, then he made the mistake without pressure. I'm not sure that that's any better. But I think we have seen Schumacher struggling by his terms to come to grips with a car that wasn't as competitive as he wanted. It wasn't winning competitive. That's what he's got now, and that's when we're seeing Schumacher at his very best once again. Hakkinen has closed the gap by 2/10, and of the leaders, this is the best battle at the moment, the battle for 5th place between Berger and Hakkinen. It's a real genuine battle too, by which I mean that they are both on the same fuel stop strategy. They are both running 3 stops, and they've both got about another or at least another 10 laps to go, 8 laps to go probably before their next stop, so we need to focus on that. Meanwhile, there's another very, very good battle for 9th place with Frentzen in the Sauber Ford, really driving very, very well indeed and continuing to underline his talent. He scored points in the last 2 Grand Prix. Panis is just 0.7 of a second though behind Frentzen with the Ligier, and Martin Brundle has now closed to within 2 seconds of Mika Sala for 12th place.
Lap 40 coming up to 2/3 distance in the Spanish Grand Prix, which is being dominated by the man you're looking at, Michael Schumacher, which gives me the opportunity to say that my heart goes out to Johnny Herbert in 3rd position, because he desperately needs a psychological boost. He's never finished on the podium in the 66 previous Grand Prix that he's driven in. He's finished 4th 5 times. He started 4th twice, once for Benetton and once for Lotus. And if Johnny could get that Benetton Renault of his up onto the 3rd step of the podium, or even the 2nd step of the podium, because he's only 4 seconds behind Damon Hill as I talk to you, it would be a wonderful thing for him.
Well, we saw the telltale signs there. The Benetton crew were getting ready for a tyre stop right on cue. It's lap 40, roughly 2/3 distance, and that means it's time for the second and last of the fuel stops that Michael Schumacher leading and Johnny Herbert have got. And we have heard it is Johnny Herbert indeed coming in for his second and last stop.
Yes, Herbert is into the pit lane. Herbert stops 7.5 seconds behind Damon Hill, who is in 2nd position, 43 seconds behind his team leader. And he's got the jack attached to his car, and he won't know that. Now, this is unprecedented. I have never seen this in a Grand Prix. Something flew off the back there. It was the jack as he exited the pit lane. The jack fortuitously, and thank heavens, came off the back of the Benetton. It fits into a special bracket underneath the car. There are the marshals doubling it. That could have caused a very nasty accident if it had come off on the track itself. The pit lane is officially part of the track, but Herbert is out. He won't actually have lost any time as a result of that. That's Flavio Briatore, the boss of the Benetton team, looking perplexed, puzzled and extremely relieved by the whole thing. Here's a replay. Look, you see the mechanic just didn't get the jack out in time. Out goes Johnny Herbert, giving it as much as he can to get up to that 75-mile-an-hour speed. Here's another replay.
Yes, indeed, and the mechanic at least has the good sense to let go, but I have never, ever seen this happen in Formula One before, and what happened there was that Herbert left, undoubtedly because of being waved away, before he should have been. Now, you see the jack handle up there. Now, thank goodness it came away. Everybody in the pit lane must have been looking at that, absolutely horrified to wonder what would have happened, and one can only guess at the horrors that could have occurred. But the good news from Herbert's point of view is that almost certainly will have caused him no problem at all. He will undoubtedly have been quite oblivious to it too, I'm sure. And I think we shall see, we know that Benetton do work very hard to make their pit stops as slick as possible. On this occasion, cutting the corners maybe just a little bit too finely.
I've seen a 6-wheel Tyrrell, I've seen a 6-wheel Williams, I've seen a 6-wheel March. I've never seen a 6-wheel Benetton before. And he's got rid of 2 of them. There they are. Is it suitable for use again? I don't know. I'm sure they've got a spare one in the pit lane. But consternation in the Benetton pit, understandably. We're on lap 42, and Michael Schumacher, now there he is. He's on lap 43, actually. As I speak, he completes his 42nd lap. And he's 37 seconds ahead of Damon Hill, second. He is 47 seconds ahead of Coulthard, who is third. He is 1 minute and 6 seconds ahead of Berger's Ferrari in 4th place. Mika Häkkinen looks as though he's going to finish in the points again. He's 6th in the World Championship at the present moment, and Johnny Herbert goes down to 6th place after that pit stop.
Now, Benetton's concern will surely be what's going to happen now on Michael Schumacher's stop. I suspect it may well be at the end of this lap, if not the one after. He's due in for his second and last stop, and I'm sure they've got a second jack, a rear jack like that. It was the rear jack that they were looking at, and indeed we saw a glimpse of them checking a pivoting mechanism, and I have a suspicion that there was some kind of hinging mechanism that didn't free off as it should have done. I suspect that the jack should have been able to accommodate the driver leaving a little bit early without carrying on with the car, and that the jack handle remained in a virtually vertical position. I'm sure that was the problem. So let's see now if Schumacher comes in for his final stop.
Yes, eyes down for number 1, because Michael Schumacher leads the Spanish Grand Prix. He should be coming in. He is coming in. We sweep into the pit lane and past the end garage up to a stop. Now, that jack will go in very carefully this time. The gap was 33 seconds. Left front okay, right rear okay, jack out 7.8 seconds, excellent stop, and Michael Schumacher rejoins the actual track in the lead of the Spanish Grand Prix now on lap 44, as he led after his first pit stop. And as he goes into the first corner, Damon Hill exits the last corner, so the gap is down to the distance of the start and finish straight. It's a long one here in Spain, but Damon Hill now will get some encouragement from that.
A testing time for the Benetton crew then, and we understand it was Steve Matcham on the back jack. He insisted that he wanted to do it again on the Schumacher pit stop, and a brave thing to do, the right thing to do too, I'm quite sure, because that must have been a pretty terrifying moment for him. But we could see on that stop just a slightly more deliberate effort to make sure that that jack was freely out before Schumacher went away. It probably cost just 3 or 4 tenths of a second, making the stop slightly longer, but it just shows you the pressure that these guys are under and how well they respond to it.
Yeah, Steve Matcham has just written a book about the life of a pit lane mechanic. That'll make a good chapter for the next one. So we're watching Damon Hill now, and he is on his 44th lap. 2 pit stops completed for the top 8. The top 8 being, and never mind the time gaps at the moment, in order they are: Schumacher leads, Hill 2nd, Coulthard 3rd, Berger 4th, Häkkinen 5th, Herbert 6th, Irvine is in 7th place, Barrichello is in 8th, and Heinz-Harald Frentzen, who is in 9th place, has been lapped. So, leader Michael Schumacher has lapped everybody up to the 8th position man. Rubens Barrichello in the Jordan. Michael Schumacher is on his 45th lap. It's a 65-lap race. You're looking at the man in 2nd place, World Championship leader Damon Hill. Into the right at the end of the straight, into the left, that's turn 2. Now up to turn 3. And he's doing 160 miles an hour in 6th gear as he goes down towards turn 4, the long right-hander. Slows down to 3rd gear, 75 miles an hour. Accelerates up to 140 into the left-hander at turn 5, 2nd gear, 60 miles an hour. Now it's a bit of a slight climb out of the left-hander up to turn 7, which is followed by a kink to the right, 4th gear, and now up to the right-hander at turn 9, which is followed by the new section. This is where the chicane was. You can see the surface of the course has changed, and he's up to about 170 miles an hour before the left-hander at turn 10, 3rd gear, 65 miles an hour. Climbing again into turn 11, then up to 130 miles an hour. And when he takes the next right-hander, which he is into now, he will be on the drop down to the last corner, turn 13, at 140 miles an hour, 7.5 seconds behind Schumacher.
And it's going to be time very soon for the 3rd and last of the 2 Williams pit stops, and we're very sure that both Damon Hill and David Coulthard need to come in. I was thinking the next couple of laps, and at the moment Hill is just 6.5 seconds behind Schumacher, but that is therefore artificial, because the pit stop, we suspect, will lose him about 20-25 seconds, putting him, and that's one of the Minardi cars, that's Morbidelli, I think, probably in the Arrows car, coming into retirement by a quick glimpse of that helmet. Oh, we think it's Inouye. I do beg your pardon.
Well, Taki Inouye, the Japanese driver, who, to be quite honest with you, was derided by a lot of people in the first 3 Grand Prix of the year, Brazil, Argentina and San Marino, has done very much better here in Spain, where he has experience of the track. He has an excellent car in the Arrows Heart. The engine, the V8 engine of Brian Hart's team, is powering a new car designed and developed by Alan Jenkins and their team. It's gone extremely well. Gianni Morbidelli has had very bad luck, and there is Hakkinen nearly losing it, and Tony Jardine is with Steve Matcham, the Benetton rear jack man.
Steve Matcham, first of all, are you okay off that pit stop when the jack got stuck?
Yes, I'm okay.
I'm just checking. I wish they'd let us look a bit closer at the car.
What actually happened?
I'm not entirely sure. I pulled the quick release mechanism on the jack, but it just wouldn't release. And then the car, as soon as it gets traction on the ground, away.
And then you had to go and do it all over again.
I think the best thing to do if something like that happens is get straight back in and have another go. My arm's still cold, but I'm okay.
That was a critical stop because then it was Schumacher coming in and your arm was still sore.
Yeah, it's fine. I'm fine.
Thank you.
So you saw a car parked at the end of the pit lane. There it is. It's the Pacific of Bertrand Gachot who exits the pit lane and is now out of the Spanish Grand Prix. And we're on lap 47. And Hill is now the fastest man on the track, as in for another set of tyres comes Mika Hakkinen from 6th position. This is his 3rd stop. He stopped twice already, and he is the first man to stop 3 times, with the exception of Roberto Moreno right at the back of the field, who's already been in and out 3 times. So Mika Hakkinen is going to lose almost certainly his 6th position as he lights up the tyres, and I'm expecting Eddie Irvine. In fact, Eddie Irvine is through and up into 6th position, back in the points again where he was earlier on in the race. And if he stays there, it will be the first point that the Jordan team with Peugeot Power has had this year.
I don't think he will, and Damon Hill comes into the pits for his 3rd pit stop. There is Hill, but I think Irvine also will be coming in very shortly for his, so Hakkinen and Irvine will once again be very equivalent on the road.
Yeah, out goes Damon Hill. A neat, swift removal of the rear jack, which we've become a lot more conscious of since that problem with Johnny Herbert's Benetton earlier on. And that, of course, will increase the gap between Michael Schumacher and Damon Hill, which was 6 seconds.
And what is going to be interesting is the next stop for David Coulthard. The Williams crew are preparing for that, because Gerhard Berger is now 22 seconds behind Coulthard. We're pretty sure that Berger's got to make a 3rd stop too, but when Coulthard comes out, if Berger hasn't come in by then, those two should be really very close together.
Pretty sure, we haven't seen it on the track, but pretty sure that David Coulthard got through and Damon Hill joined after him. Sure enough, just as Jonathan predicted, there is Eddie Irvine from 6th position in the Jordan Peugeot. New tyres, out he goes. That's his 3rd stop. So there have been 3 stops from Hill, 3 stops from Irvine now, and 3 stops from Roberto Moreno. And through to complete his 48th lap, into his 49th, again tucked up behind Ukyo Katayama, who is in 15th place and has already been lapped once. He's now been lapped twice by the world champion Michael Schumacher, leading here as he led in Brazil earlier on. And David Coulthard into the pits now. This is his 3rd stop, and he's coming in from 2nd place. He had got through in front of Damon Hill, but the positions will change now, of course, as out goes David Coulthard, and the gap is mounting. Michael Schumacher, as he was in a very commanding position earlier on with a lead of over half a minute, is going to be back in that situation very shortly on lap 49, coming into the closing stages of the Spanish Grand Prix, a 65-lap race, which Schumacher has dominated from the moment the lights turned green until he went into the first corner. Came through at the end of the first lap with a lead of a full second, and that is a tremendous achievement. And now you can see The gap between himself and Damon Hill is nearly 27 seconds.
And that stop of David Coulthard was in fact the fastest we've seen throughout the entire race. 26.88 seconds from the start of the pit lane until the end. Again underlying just how important it is for the drivers to be quick coming into the pit lane without making mistakes. The actual time that they spend stationary, it probably influences the time they lose overall by probably about a third. 2/3 of it is determined by how quickly they come in and out of the pits.
I have to say that the performance of the Ferraris has been very disappointing in this race. I don't say that critically, but rather sadly, because everybody had hoped that they would be more on the pace than they have been. And as I say it, there are the Ferrari mechanics waiting for presumably that car, because it's the only Ferrari left in the race, with Jean Alesi having retired a long time ago. Gerhard Berger, it's a pretty close thing between him and David Coulthard at the present moment for third position, with Schumacher leading Damon Hill by 25 seconds on lap 50 with another 15 to go. And Gerhard Berger due for his third tyre stop. Johnny Herbert is down to 5th position. Rubens Barrichello is in 6th place. Eddie Irvine is in 7th place. So, with a bit of luck, it means that the Jordan team will get not just one car home, but both of them for the first time this year. Into the pits comes the Jordan of Rubens Barrichello, 6th position. Now, Eddie Irvine was 4 seconds behind him, so that means to say that the Irish driver will move up back into 6th position. Looks as though one of the Jordans is certainly going to finish in the points, and there is Gerhard Berger coming towards us now in the Ferrari. I was saying that it's disappointing that the Ferraris haven't gone better. Alesi blew his engine, battling for 2nd position. Gerhard Berger has been well up at the front of the field, but from the way they went in practice, and I remind you that both Alesi and Berger started in front of David Coulthard and Damon Hill, and now Berger comes into the pits. We look down on the Ferrari to the right of the track, and this will put David Coulthard in a strong position for 3rd place in Spain. And it lifts Johnny Herbert up into 4th position, so now it's 2 Benettons and 2 Williams Renaults in the top 4, with Gerhard Berger exiting the pit lane down to 5th position. Rubens Barrichello or Eddie Irvine in 6th place. We'll know when they come through at the end of this lap. Berger going up into turn 1, and on the left is Niki Lauda, 3 times world champion, who is employed by Ferrari to give them the benefit of his very considerable advice as one of the greatest racing drivers of all time.
And this really is proving to be the best race of the year so far for the Jordan team, with Eddie Irvine in 6th place and Rubens Barrichello in 8th, and that's going to be very well timed for the Jordan team, because for the first time ever the president of the Peugeot Citroën Group, Jacques Calvet, has actually attended a Grand Prix. So the fact that it should be this one here, I'm sure will be much appreciated by Eddie Jordan, particularly if the next or the remaining 13, 14 laps of this Grand Prix continue to see these Jordan cars with their Peugeot engines that incidentally have had a change of engine. They've had engine problems in the past. The Jordans have had Peugeot engine problems, but Peugeot have changed the specification to a more reliable specification in the quest for race results, and it looks as if their work really is going to bear fruit, with certainly at least 1, possibly 2 points finishes for the Jordans.
Yeah, a massive sigh of relief as the Williams passes Pierluigi Martini and laps his Minardi for the 3rd time. The Minardi team not at all happy with their performance, constantly moaning about a lack of power, which I don't think is very fair to the Ford ED engine, which has been going extremely well for them. But there is Coulthard, now 3rd. So it looks as though it's going to be 10 Constructors' Championship points for the Williams team. And here's a replay. Let's see something flying off. I think it was one of the Jordans that was going through the picture there. And that looks like the part of the exhaust pipe which goes into the under tray, and helps the aerodynamics and the downforce of the car by literally blowing the exhaust gases onto the underside of the diffuser, which helps to pull the car down towards the ground. David Coulthard, third position. You can see the gap between himself and Johnny Herbert, and it's 3 British drivers in the top 4, and it's 4 British drivers in the top 6.
And this battle is the best battle of the moment in the closing 14 laps of this Grand Prix. Johnny Herbert having his best race of the year so far, being just 4 seconds behind David Coulthard, and he is going to be more motivated, I am quite sure, than at any time in his career, because he's in a tremendous car. The Benetton car is clearly on the pace in a big way here, with Schumacher being so dominant, and they've made what looks to be the shrewdest pit stop strategy. It certainly hasn't harmed them, and Herbert and Coulthard both have the same Renault engines, 2 British drivers, and so far it's been very much David Coulthard who's been the name in the media. He's been the new force coming through. And Johnny Herbert has rather suffered as being the Benetton number 2 to Michael Schumacher, so I shall be very pleased indeed if we can see Herbert close that gap, potentially get on terms with Coulthard. Of course, getting by is another problem, but it also has to be said that all of the cars now have completed their pit stops. The cars as we see them, the order we see them on, are now going to continue. There are going to be no further pit stops for refueling or tyres. There may be some for punctures or any other reason, and we've got a straight race to the flag for the closing 12 laps.
Time then to establish the positions on lap 54 out of 65. Schumacher, a dominant, commanding, crushing lead of 23 seconds in front of Damon Hill, his World Championship rival, and a lead of 45 seconds in front of David Coulthard in the second Williams Renault. But the gap between Coulthard third and Johnny Herbert fourth is only 4 seconds and reducing, because Johnny Herbert is now lapping faster than Coulthard, although whether he's lapping fast enough to gain 4 seconds, never mind get past the Scotsman, I do not know. In 5th position is Gerhard Berger, and he is 67 seconds behind the leader. Eddie Irvine is in 6th position, 11 seconds behind Gerhard Berger, and only the top 6 are on the same lap, lap 54 out of 65. And Michael Schumacher is probably going to take Eddie Irvine before the end of the race. So, down to turn 1, braking from some 180 miles an hour into the 3rd gear, 85 mile an hour right-hander, goes the world champion. And Michael Schumacher is in many ways reminiscent of the great Ayrton Senna. He's not just, as I said earlier on, devastatingly fit. He's a man that pays the most minute attention to every detail of his racing career. This is his job, this is his profession, and he makes sure that he leaves no stone unturned to be the best. And he's in the best car at the present moment. The fact that the Benetton Renault is as far ahead of the others as it is proof of that. Although a lot of that will be down to the expertise and the sheer brilliance of the man who is driving it. Because Johnny Herbert is lapping slower than Michael Schumacher, not all that much slower at the moment, but I'm mindful of the fact that Schumacher will know that he's got this 22-second lead now over Damon Hill, with 11 laps left, including the one that he's shortly to conclude, and he will therefore not be forcing things too much, although paradoxically he won't be slowing down too much either, because the moment you slow down you lose your rhythm and you lose your concentration, and the moment you lose your concentration you can be in real trouble. Remember when Ayrton Senna was leading Alain Prost in the Monaco Grand Prix, lost his concentration, crashed in the entrance to the tunnel, and it was simply because he had allowed his attention to lapse, and Michael Schumacher will be taking good care that he doesn't do that.
And that was the garage door coming down on the McLaren garage, where Mika Häkkinen has pulled out of the race into retirement. There's Häkkinen, some kind of problem with his McLaren Mercedes. We may find out later what it is. But while that's happening, Johnny Herbert is closing on David Coulthard. He has now taken nearly a second off David Coulthard. and is just 3.3 seconds behind.
Now, you saw a flash of puff of smoke on the left of your picture there, as I did. I don't know what it was. Hopefully if it was something, we'll see. Now, that's David Coulthard going inside. Heinz Harald Frentzen Sauber with smoke pouring out of the back of the Williams. Is he going to lose? Yes! David Coulthard retires from the Spanish Grand Prix with 9 or 10 laps left. And that is a bitter pill for the young Scotsman to take. Gloom in the Williams pit, as there is in the McLaren pit. It hasn't been a good race for McLaren. It's been a terrible race, and it's turning out to be a bad one for Williams. And that means to say now that Johnny Herbert is third and that Damon Hill is sandwiched between two Benetton Renaults, and the way Johnny Herbert is flying, it's not inconceivable that he will be able to catch the car in front. We'll see.
Well, that really was cruel fortune for David Coulthard there, and one suspects that it was Coulthard's engine, and I'm sure that was an engine problem. It certainly looked like it. It was Coulthard's engine that may have been going off a little that helped Johnny Herbert as he closed up on Coulthard. But Herbert now, he's 30 seconds behind Damon Hill. There's no chance of catching Hill, but it looks to be a Benetton in first and third here, with now just 9 laps to go. And behind that, we've got Gerhard Berger in fourth, Eddie Irvine in fifth, and Rubens Barrichello in sixth. So Jordan's fifth and sixth.
And that's a replay of David Coulthard pulling off. Yes, Johnny Herbert is indeed nearly 31 seconds behind Damon Hill. But if he finishes third, it will be the first time that he's on the podium. There is the Renault boss with Frank Williams, and it looks as though things are going well for him here in Spain, with Schumacher in the lead and Damon Hill in second place, albeit not as well as it was going to be, because then he had 3 cars in the top 3. David Coulthard out of the race, so Benetton Renault leads. Williams Renault second. The Benetton Renault of Johnny Herbert is in third position. The Ferrari of Gerhard Berger is now well out of the picture in fourth place, because he's 15 seconds behind Johnny Herbert. Eddie Irvine in sixth position. Rubens Barrichello in sixth position. The Peugeot boss had better come to some more Grand Prix, because he seems to have brought a lot of luck with him. This will be not just the first time that a Jordan Peugeot has finished in the points, but the first time that both of them have finished in the points, if Irvine is fifth and Barrichello is sixth. But there's still 8 laps to go. Schumacher leads, Hill second, Herbert third, Berger fourth, Irvine fifth, Barrichello sixth, and now only 5 cars are on the same lap. The 5 men at the front of the Spanish Grand Prix at the Catalunya circuit.
And Eddie Irvine really is proving himself to be both a quick and mature racing driver now. He came into Formula One just over a year ago, when he made his race debut at the Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka, when he got into a controversial contretemps with Ayrton Senna, when he re-overtook Senna when Senna was lapping him in difficult conditions. He then went on to be blamed for the accident at the start of the 1994 season that saw Jos Verstappen's Benetton barrel roll on the Brazilian Grand Prix at some 160 miles an hour. He was banned for 3 races after that. But he has really settled down, and he was certainly blamed for 1 or 2 errors that really weren't his, and perhaps punished a bit harder than anybody else might have done. But none of that, I'm sure, matters to Eddie Irvine now. He knows he's quick. He's got a tremendous confidence about him, and the season started with Rubens Barrichello thinking that he was the number 1 at Jordan, I'm quite sure, but Irvine has out-qualified Barrichello on every race so far, and that is just so important for a driver. It's actually more important in many ways for a driver to out-qualify their teammate than it is to outrace them, because in the race so many other factors are known to come into play, from reliability to the way the car's set up. But qualifying is the purest barometer of sheer driver pace, and on those grounds Irvine has been quicker than Barrichello. And racing-wise, well, Barrichello hasn't finished a race this season through no fault of his own, it has to be said. He is a very smooth, sensitive driver, and this time he surely is going to, although that is going to be 18 seconds behind Eddie Irvine, and it looks very much as if Jordan have taken over from McLaren as being one of the top 4 teams.
Yes, and the wish that a lot of people had that they would see a new Grand Prix winner here in Spain today is not going to be fulfilled. We've had Damon Hill win twice this year. We had Michael Schumacher win in Brazil. only to have the victory taken away from him and then return to him. And he's going to win here in Spain, provided he can do the lap that he's on and the 5 that follow that. He's on lap 60 now. It's a 65-lap race, and Gerhard Berger that you're looking at in the Ferrari as he turns inside and then into the left-hander. And Gerhard Berger is now 73 seconds behind race leader Michael Schumacher on lap 60. But Johnny Herbert looks as though he's going to be on the podium for the first time, and as we've said before, it looks as though the Jordans are going to go home from Spain very happy indeed. Olivier Panis is in 7th place in the Ligier Moudon. Heinz-Harald Frentzen, who's finished in the points twice for Sauber this year, is in 8th position, and his teammate Martin Brundle, who dropped so far down the field, is in 9th position, lapped by the leaders. And out of the race goes the Tyrrell Yamaha of Ukyo Katayama, who was in 4th position, 2 laps behind the leaders. We're running down to the closing stages of the race now. Normally the retirements are finished by this stage of the race, and cars that are going now tend to keep going to the end of the race, but not in the unfortunate Katayama's case, although his teammate Mika Salo is in 7th position in his first Spanish Grand Prix.
One that I sincerely hope does keep going to the very end is that of Jos Verstappen. The Simtek is currently in 12th place, and Verstappen and the Simtek really have been one of the finds of 1995, but being a team towards the back end of the field, it's very easy to miss out and overlook to see just what a good job they're doing. Their budget is absolutely minuscule, but Verstappen has actually outraced here today. Carl Wendlinger in the Sauber with the Worksport engine. He's outraced Martini in the Minardi, and his teammate Schiaparella. I mean, in fact, he was ahead of Katayama before Katayama stopped. It maybe was an electrical problem there. Katayama's had a frustrating season by his terms, certainly a disappointing season. There have been more than a few blow-ups of the Yamaha engine. It's a powerful engine, but still hasn't got the reliability really required to get consistent results. But Katayama's bigger problem, I believe, has been Mika Sala, the young Finn who cut his teeth and really came to the fore in Japanese Formula 3000 racing, and Formula 3000 is the category 1 junior to Formula 1. You could consider it to be Formula 2. Japanese Formula 3000 is very competitive. Eddie Irvine was one of the stars from Formula 3000 in Japan, and Salo made his race debut at the Japanese Grand Prix last year and did exceptionally well, and he's proving to be more than a match for Katayama, driving exceedingly well. I think we're going to see great things from Salo in the future.
Lap 62, you're watching the race leader. A lot of you may be wondering what happened to Nigel Mansell on his return to the Spanish Grand Prix, which he's won twice, and the answer is that he was one of the earliest retirements. He went straight across the gravel trap and retired, got out of the car, very disillusioned, to put it mildly, complaining about the fact that when you turn the steering wheel you expect the car to follow you and not to go straight on, and he appeared to be a disillusioned and unhappy man. And now we're on lap 62 with Benettons first and third, Schumacher and Herbert, Hill in the middle, Berger fourth, Irvine fifth, Barrichello sixth, 2 Jordans in the top 6.
I think it should be made quite clear that Mansell, I don't believe, had any kind of steering problem, and he wouldn't want it to come over that way. There was no breakage, for example, in the steering mechanism of his McLaren. What Mansell meant was that he had understeer, which means that when he turned the steering wheel, the front slid. It did not turn into the corner as sharply as he would have wanted it to. It drifted a bit wide, and if he's going a little bit too quickly for that degree of front slide, then he will go off the road, and that's, I believe, what he did.
Now we're on the 62nd lap in the 65-lap Spanish Grand Prix, and you're watching the Minardi, or you were watching the Minardi and the Tyrrell of Mika Salo going through. There is Mika Salo on the left, and the Minardi of that is that of Pierluigi Martini. And the Minardis are right off the pace this year. Mika Salo has lapped in 10th position Pierluigi Martini, who is in 4th position. And the race leader, Michael Schumacher, is almost home. As you looked there at Eddie Irvine, there he is with that top-mounted camera, which sadly we've seen nothing from at all in this race, which is a great pity because it gives us a very distinctive and interesting view of what the racing driver sees. But Irvine won't be worrying about that. He's in 5th position. He's on a potential 2 points if he can just keep going. He hasn't actually got to do 65 laps. He's already been lapped. You've seen he's behind Michael Schumacher now, and that's Katayama leaning against the wall, helmet off. He's having a poor season. He's being dominated by his new teammate, Mika Salo from Finland. And Katayama, who went so well in 1994 and who is definitely the best driver that Japan has ever produced, is gone off the boil in 1995 and is dispirited as a result of the success of his new teammate Mika Salo. So, lap 63.
And we've just...
Schumacher through into his 64th and last lap but one. This one and the last lap for Michael Schumacher to be victorious in Spain and to get 10 points.
And the message from the Spanish Grand Prix this weekend is that Benetton are back. The work that they have done improving the car really has borne fruit, with Schumacher surely taking a very dominant victory here. Herbert in 3rd place, underlining the competitiveness of the team, and indeed Herbert's own increasing confidence. A frustrating time, I think, for Williams, both with Coulthard's retirement, but also Damon Hill. Damon has not been on the pace here in qualifying, and he wasn't in the race. Finishing 2nd is a good result for Damon. It'll help his championship position and chances, but there will be a lot of hard work going on, I'm sure, back at Disfruta to draw them back up level with Benetton for the next race. While Ferrari have demonstrated increased pace, there's no doubt about that. They too have improved their performance. They've demonstrated, certainly with Berger, that reliability is still pretty good, although Alesi went out with an engine problem. But what they haven't got is stamina, and that we've seen Berger slip from being ahead of the Williams at the start, and indeed Alesi was ahead, to being behind at the end. So more work for them. But of the improvements, the biggest must surely have come from Jordan, taking a superb fifth here. Rubens Barrichello following in 6th, 2 very evenly matched drivers, and a team that have really forced their way through from having been coming into Formula 1 as a newcomer in 1990 and to being a strong top 6 runner, one of the top 4 teams in 1995, and that's hard to do.
Well, the tables are going to be turned. Last year, Damon Hill won in Spain, and Michael Schumacher jammed in 5th gear for much of the race, brilliantly finished in 2nd position. This year, Michael Schumacher is brilliantly going to win the race, and Damon Hill is going to finish in 2nd position if they can just finish this lap. If that happens, Damon Hill will go to Monaco, still leading the Drivers' World Championship by 2 points, with Michael Schumacher in 2nd position, which is where he is now. But Alesi, who started joint 2nd with Schumacher in the championship, will be down to 3rd. But that remains to be seen. The end of the race is in sight for a quite superb German world champion, the first ever in the history of the World Championship, which started in 1950. And Michael Schumacher has only just got a few corners now, having absolutely dominated this race. He is 25 seconds, as near as makes no difference, ahead of Damon Hill. And Michael Schumacher in the Benetton Renault is the winner of the 1995 Spanish Grand Prix at Barcelona. Out comes his arm, and he waves victoriously to his Benetton pit mechanics. Flavio Briatore is overjoyed. That's 2 wins from 4 races for Schumacher. 2 wins from 4 races for Damon Hill, who will come through and finish in 2nd place to get those 6 points that will keep him 2 points ahead of Michael Schumacher in the World Championship. But that is the man. And they're very happy men indeed, waiting to greet their man home again. And Johnny Herbert will be coming through in 3rd position, and that's the highest he's ever finished, and the only time so far in his career that he will have been on the podium. And Johnny Herbert has... Now, I'm flabbergasted because our monitor has indicated that Johnny Herbert has gone through in second position. We haven't seen Damon Hill. Berger has finished. Berger is third. An absolute sensation on the very last lap in Spain. Schumacher has certainly won, and I haven't seen Hill cross the line. I have seen Herbert cross the line. I have seen Berger cross the line, but we haven't seen anything from around the track or through the cameras and the monitors of Damon Hill and the Williams. Surely Damon hasn't gone out on the 65th and last lap. If he has, he will be classified fourth, but that will mean to say that Michael Schumacher, there he is, will now be leading the World Championship. I haven't the remotest idea what's happened. I cannot guess. It wouldn't be fair to Hill or to you or to me to do so. All I can tell you is that Damon Hill has not gone through.
And indeed it appears that Damon Hill spun on the very last lap.
There he is! Damon Hill crosses the line, coasts across the line, and he will be absolutely gutted. That is the right word to use as he stops in front of his pit. And we've just had a message from the Williams pit to say that his hydraulic pressure failed on the last lap, which would affect all kinds of functions in the car. Oh, what bitter gall for Damon, who was certain of second position and has now finished fourth. And the result is Schumacher wins. Herbert finishes for the first time ever, not just on the podium, but in second place. And Benetton and Renault have first and second places in Spain. Ferrari have third for Berger, and fourth is Damon Hill. Irvine finishes in fifth position for Jordan in the points, but on that last lap, just as Damon Hill had a problem, so did Rubens Barrichello, because Olivier Panis gets points for the Ligier-Mugen team for the first time this year. A quite incredible finish. Barrichello 7th, Frentzen 8th, Brundle 9th, and Micasalo 10th.
And if our information is correct, that Damon Hill did indeed spin, that would certainly have been a consequence of the loss of hydraulic pressure, and that would have affected the gearbox. The gearbox is powered by hydraulics, and that would have locked up the back end. So the spin would have been quite immaterial. It would have been a fundamental mechanical problem.
Well, whatever. You saw a downcast and understandably Damon Hill walk through the garage. And it's an understandably elated Michael Schumacher and an understandably elated Johnny Herbert. Whilst I'm desperately sorry for Damon Hill, as we all will be, I am overjoyed and unashamedly so for Johnny Herbert, who at last is seeing a return from all the effort that he's put into his racing over the years, because for several years he drove for Lotus in a situation where, frankly, there was no chance of him doing well because the car just wasn't good enough. There was always a danger that he would be written off because people would have forgotten just how good he always has been. British Formula 3 champion. He won a race in Formula 3000 before he had a dreadful crash and shattered both his legs at Brands Hatch. Then he had that painful recovery, and now at last he's got the success he deserves.
And Schumacher, in fact, or rather Hill, was not the only person who suffered on the very last lap, because Rubens Barrichello had some kind of problem. He lost some 20 seconds on the last lap, and that's put him behind Olivier Panis, who takes sixth place, with Barrichello now being demoted there to seventh.
Well, a quite amazing ending at the end of the Spanish Grand Prix. Michael Schumacher in the area there before he goes up to the interview room, and I'm sure he's going to be telling us that whilst he was very mindful of what was happening behind him, he was pacing himself all the way, because in the end analysis he won by 52 seconds. To be fair to him and to Damon Hill, it wouldn't have been anything like as big a gap had poor Damon been able to finish, but that's Formula One for you. You can never be sure about anything until they have seen the checkered flag. Schumacher wins in Spain and gets 10 points for doing so, and that means to say that he has now got 24 points.
certainly after covering the last 10 laps, when Damon Hill could quite reasonably have been concerned about reliability, that's when, as a driver, you just pray that everything keeps together, when you know that you're not going to be pressurised anymore, when you know that a result is within your grasp. It's the last lap. For it to happen on the last lap is beyond belief, and Damon will be completely numb with that.
24 points for Michael Schumacher in the World Championship, and 23 points for Damon Hill. So there is only 1 point between them, if my mental arithmetic is correct, and I think it is, as they go to Monaco, which will be all the more incentive for both of them as the top three. And again, there is a Ferrari driver on the podium. There was one in Brazil, officially in third place at the end of the race. There was one in Argentina, it was Alesi for second. There was one at Imola, and it was Alesi again for second place. There is one here, Gerhard Berger, as the German national anthem sounds.
And now,
Deutschland über alles for Michael Schumacher, but for the winning constructor, the British national anthem, which can certainly apply to Johnny Herbert for a superb second place. A day of joy for Benetton, for Johnny Herbert and for Michael Schumacher, and I make no apologies for putting the drivers in that order. Johnny Herbert deserves a first mention. A day of gloom for Williams with no driver on the podium, but a day of some satisfaction for Ferrari, because although Jean Alesi retired, and although neither he nor Gerhard Berger were frankly up to the pace of the winner, Michael Schumacher, who really is in a class of his own these days in the Benetton, both the Ferraris once again underlined that they are extremely competitive and fulfill the prophecy of Gerhard Berger, who said, I don't expect us to be really on the pace in the race until the Canadian Grand Prix. Now, the Canadian Grand Prix is 2 from now. There's the Monaco Grand Prix on May the 28th, and then the Canadian Grand Prix. So it is just about a month to Canada, and in that time, Gerhard Berger is pretty confident that the non-stop Ferrari development will bring them up to the pace of Benetton and Williams, and let us hope that he is right.
Whilst Williams certainly would never have underestimated Benetton, I suspect they're going to be rather shocked with this level of dominance, not just on pace, but also reliability, with both Benetton and Renaults, of course, finishing strongly, and both Williams succumbing to problems. The engine problem we suspect for David Coulthard, but it could have been gearbox. What we actually saw was smoke coming out of the back of the car, and then that hydraulic problem for Hill at the end. And I'm sure there's going to be a great deal of work. They are not going to allow Benetton to continue, if they can possibly help it, to have this kind of margin. And the Benetton team have about half a second a lap, I would say, car-wise, over the Williams and the Ferrari at present. And Johnny Herbert's done himself a power of good here this weekend. He's qualified well, but he's also, and more particularly, he's raced well, because after 65 laps, he was 52 seconds down, and that means about 0.8 of a lap. And as well as being, or apart from being 0.8 of a lap slower, that is not at all bad, particularly when you consider that Herbert had the traffic of being further back in the rankings, and that Schumacher was generally out in front and had the benefits of being in front in terms of early traffic and lapping people later on.
And a word of encouragement too for the Ligier Mugen team, because Olivier Parnish took that last World Championship point, the first for the team this year, by finishing in 6th place, and Martin Brundle can go home to King's Lynn in East Anglia feeling quite well satisfied with what he did. 9th position, and it was his first Grand Prix since Australia. He's back in the groove, and I'm sure that by the time he gets to Monaco, with all his experience and some testing between now and then, he'll be up amongst the others who can stand a chance of getting certainly in the top 6, if not on the podium.
And once again, Benetton have been forward-thinking and creative in their pit stop strategy. Of the leading cars of Williams and McLaren and Ferrari, it was only Benetton who opted to stop twice, with the other 3 major teams stopping 3 times. Now, I suspect that did not make a big difference, but again, Benetton are not a team to follow the trend, and they make their own minds up, and this time, clearly, it didn't do them any harm at all. But Schumacher really is quite superb. That was a stunning qualifying performance that we saw from Schumacher, half a second faster than anybody else, and a stunning race performance. He did not put a foot or a wheel wrong.